Russell, Texas, Bentley. He's a legend. He's a story. He's a beautiful heart who, in this insane situation between Russia and Ukraine, picked the side of the people of Donbass. It's my honor and privilege to introduce Russell, Texas, Bentley. Hi, Russell.
Hi, Elena. Thank you very much for those kind words. It's a pleasure to be with you. I respect your work very much. I've seen what you're doing, and I'm glad to see that we have more comrades in the information war.
Thank you very much. Thank you for kind words, Russell. I have a lot of questions for you because, as you know, you are the legend of Donbass, the legend of Texas. Everybody wants to know what Russell's opinion is. You were even recently mentioned on one of our famous shows called Redacted here in United States. So everybody wants to know what Russell feels, what Russell thinks, because our guess is as good as anyone's. We have no idea, but you are right there on the ground. Could you tell us a little bit? How is the situation in Donbass right now? Are the civilians suffering? Are there daily deaths? Are there daily shellings? What the people are saying, what the people are feeling like on the ground where you're at in Donetsk?
Well, it's better than it was, say, a month ago. But it was really, really horrible then. We're still, we're still getting shelled on a daily basis by the Ukrainian army. They do just random shellings to kind of terrorize the whole city. And then they also specifically have targeted our hospitals, our schools, our churches, our open air markets. The Krita have been hit several times. Particularly the district, Petrovsky district, where my wife and I have a house. It's very close to Mariinka, very close to the front. There's been 4 houses on our street that have been hit, and maybe a month ago or less, we had a heavy artillery shell, probably 122. That landed within 100 meters of our house. Shrapnel rained down on our house.
Wow.
So it's,
Russell, go ahead.
It's a very difficult situation. Also, another difficulty that the people of Donetsk have these days is the tap water. Of course, everybody buys their drinking water. We're paying 4 rubles per liter, which is not unreasonable, but that's for drinking water. But our tap water, in some districts, it runs just for a few hours once every 3 days, like in Petrovsky district. So that's, for taking a bath, for flushing the toilet, for washing dishes, stuff like that. You have to save up as much as you can as soon as it starts running. And sometimes it doesn't start running.
It doesn't start running. Russell, of course, the people who are watching this from the West and in the world and the countries around the world, they probably think that all this shelling and all the pedal mines, that the pedal mines could be this year, but all the terrible situation, humanitarian situation in Donbass that has been going on here has just started in 2022. My understanding is the people of the world have no idea because the Western media have not told them the truth about this situation. And you have been in Donbass since 2014, correct?
That's correct.
You could probably attest that this is not new situation. The shelling in Donbass has not started in 2022. When did it actually start, even though it became different or more, or now this one's a little less, but when did the shelling of Donbass area that used to be a part of Eastern Ukraine and now in the year 2022 voted to join Russia, when did the shelling start in the area where you're at?
Actually in the Donbass area, the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, it started in the spring of 2014, even before I got here. One of the things that motivated me to come here was seeing the horrific war crimes that were being committed by the Ukrainian army, the Pravi sector, Nazi groups. And, I have to say a lot of people, they get worried, they're like, oh, Russell, please don't say Nazi so much, but if a dog is a dog, then I don't really appreciate people saying, hey, please don't call that dog a dog. And these are real Nazis. I mean, the Ukrainian army is now filled, not just Azov, not just Pravi sector, but the actual army itself, filled with guys that say Heil Hitler. They have 1488 tattoos. They have swastika tattoos. They have, German Nazi flags on their tanks, on their bunkers, in their barracks, pictures of Hitler. They raise their hand and say Heil Hitler or Geroyam Slava, which is exactly the same thing as saying Heil Hitler. It was the Ukrainian partisan army that was collaborators with Hitler. So, this war has been going on since, the spring of 2014. And when the Maidan coup that was, directed, armed, paid for, completely controlled by the U.S. State Department, Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, the ambassador, U.S. ambassador. I mean, when they had the famous intercepted phone call where Nuland said, F the EU, and everybody's like, oh, she used bad words. That was missing the whole point. The point of that conversation was that every single person that she mentioned in that conversation ended up exactly in the position that she said she wanted them into. So that's how obvious it is that this is an American controlled puppet government that uses war criminals, terrorists, neo-Nazis, real Heil Hitler Nazis as their muscle. And when the people of Donbass, who remember their history, who remember what happened right here in this area, 80 years ago during the German Nazi occupation, they said, we're not having that. We're not going to have dudes that say Heil Hitler, be our mayor or our police chief or anything like that. And the U.S. ordered the Ukrainians to send in the army, tanks, APCs, aircraft, airstrikes, artillery, the whole 9 yards. And they've used it. And when they first came in, the people of Donbass stood there in front of them and they put their hands on the front of the tanks. They said, look, we're your own citizens. We're your own countrymen. Why are you coming here to kill us? And they were killed. They were ran over by tanks. They were shot down. They were blown up.
Yep, I've seen the videos from 2014 where the people standing on the streets are trying to put some tires and the tank runs them all over and on a high speed rolls into the city. That was shocker. But of course, Western media didn't show any of it over the years. I know that you have been interviewed by Western media over the last so many years. Did they ever ask you what is going on? Why are you there? Why these people are fighting? I mean, I'm sure you told them, but they don't come back here and deliver this, the news to us.
Not at all. I mean, it's, I've been interviewed by the Independent from Russia, by the Guardian. The Independent from Great Britain, the Guardian from Great Britain, Australian Broadcast Corporation, Newsweek, Rolling Stone, Texas Monthly. I mean, these are major multi-million subscriber, mainstream Western media. And every single interview that they ever did, it was like to try and do a hatchet job on me, to try and discredit me or to say, oh, this is, a Putin stooge or something like that.
Yeah.
But really, Vice News also, even in 2015, they sent one of their clowns over here and, and they try and discredit me, but really they can't, because they can't disprove anything I say. Everything that I say, they have to admit. And they say, oh, well, what he's saying is really true, but it's totally what the Pentagon, what the Kremlin is saying too, and it's like, well, if it's true and we're both saying it, then what's the surprise about that? But Western media, the only thing that's worth watching Western media for these days is to literally understand that what they say is, literally the exact opposite of the truth.
Exactly.
I wrote a article back in the spring of 2022 about Western media coverage of the Operation Z, the special operation here. And on March 14th of 2022, the Ukrainian army fired a Tochka-U ballistic missile at the center of Donetsk. It was hit by our air defense, and it was, unfortunately, it was filled with cluster munitions, cluster bombs. And of 50 cassettes in the missile, only 2 actually exploded because it had been intercepted. But those 2 cassettes killed 24 people on University Boulevard, just on, in the middle of a Monday afternoon, people driving to lunch, driving to work, whatever. And a photograph was taken, there's 24 dead people laying in the street there. One of the photographers here took a photo, an iconic picture, a man standing, a pensioner standing on the street over the body of his dead wife.
Yes, I remember that.
His face in his hands.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The next day, La Stampa, a major Italian newspaper, on their front page, top fold, big picture. This picture, they stole it from the photographer. They didn't ask his permission. They didn't pay him. They stole this photo. They run it on their front page, and it's like the carnage. Russia continues to attack Ukraine.
Yep.
So they use a photograph of a Ukrainian attack against Donetsk, and the headline, Russia attacks Ukraine. And that's far from the only, and it's not the only example at all. There's dozens of them.
Yes,
so literally they're saying the opposite of the truth. And that's not a lie, that's a damn lie.
I get it, because it almost looks like, and I've heard several people who actually understand what happens in Ukraine said, there is a pretty safe bet that whatever Ukraine says Russia is doing is actually what Ukraine is doing, sort of as a projection. And the Western media have been complicit for years of suppressing the truth and not sharing the truth with the people of the world, people of United States, which brings me back to a lot of questions that we're going to start on right now.
Okay.
What it's like to be American, Russell, in the war, and how easy or how difficult it was for you to make a decision to join people of Donbass in their fight since 2014 for the last almost 9 years and counting. What it's like to be American in a war zone and to be surrounded by people that maybe you don't understand their language to start with, and how did you integrate yourself into helping Donbass and standing with people of Donbass?
Well, growing up, I always was paying attention to history and politics. I was born in 1960. So, this was the time I remember. I lived in Dallas when John F. Kennedy was murdered there. I remember it. This was the time of the Vietnam War, of the civil rights movement, where people were marching to be treated equally as other citizens. And, I understood that perhaps the dominant paradigm, the opinion that most people had was not only maybe not true, but maybe not even good, And so I studied, I read like the books of Ho Chi Minh. I came to understand that the Vietnamese people had every right to defend themselves and their country against foreign invaders. And so I always had a different perspective from most people in America. I saw what happened in Yugoslavia. I saw, the first Iraq War, the second Iraq War, Afghanistan, 9/11, which, anyone with any sense knows that that was a job that was done by the United States government. It was an inside job, and that's all there is to it. There's no other possible explanation for it. So, I saw a government, the U.S. government, that was murdering and pillaging countries around the world and starting to do the same thing to their own citizens. I saw when Muammar Gaddafi was murdered in 2011, and the most prosperous country in Africa, which was Libya, was turned into a failed state, and Mad Max, bandit country. And it had been the most prosperous country in Africa. And after that happened, I was ashamed to be living in America and not doing more than I was doing. I was furiously writing on Facebook, and putting the angry icon and stuff like that. But that did not cut it for me, so and so when I saw the same thing happening in Maidan, I understood that it was a foreign-backed coup d'etat, that the United States was going to go in and do to Ukraine what they had done to Libya and Yugoslavia and Iraq and Afghanistan. And when I saw the people of Donbass suffering under airstrikes and artillery strikes and being blown up by tanks and snipers, I said, I'm going to go there, and I'm either going to defeat these Nazis that are attacking them, or I'm going to die with them. I'm going to stand on the right side of history, whatever comes. And to be honest, when I came here in December of 2014, I was 54 years old. I didn't really speak any Russian at all. I did have some military experience, but I didn't expect to live through the winter. I didn't. And it wasn't that I had a death wish by any means. I had a good job. I had a nice, comfortable life in the United States, but I had to stand up for my principles and what I believed in. And so I came here and I joined the Army here. I joined Vostok Battalion and Sud Vremeny. I ended up working in the Spetsnaz Battalion too. 2014, 2015, and 2017, I served in the Army in combat on the front lines. And I've also been doing information warfare since then and humanitarian aid. And I'm very proud of the humanitarian work that we've done and for my journalism that has reached people across the world and has gotten the truth out there. It's like independent journalists, honest journalists like us, Elena, we're fighting a war that's literally a million to one against us. For every dollar that we have, the BBC and CNN and all these liars, New York Times, New York Post, they have millions of dollars, but we have the truth, and a dollar's worth of truth is more powerful than $1,000 of BS.
I agree with you regarding the truth being the main factor that we all should strive to uncover the truth, because if we have been lied to, and I believe we American people here in America, the taxpayers, we have been lied to for years. We have been sending money to Ukraine under the premise that we're fighting the war of sorts that Putin started. And then we know that the coup that started in 2014, late 2013 in Ukraine was orchestrated by, as we know now, by Victoria Nuland, Barack Obama, Biden, Pelosi, Kerry, even McCain, a Republican senator, was flying there every week. Joe Biden was vice president at the time. And of course, Victoria Nuland, like you mentioned in that famously leaked conversation, handpicked Ukrainian coup government, which the coup removed democratically elected at that time president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. And so all these people, the Biden, the Obama, who actually, you rightly so mentioned about Libya, Obama said Gaddafi must go. Remember that famous speech that Obama declared that Gaddafi needs to go, and then they took down Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi, Libyan leader. And so in the year 2022, Joe Biden went to Poland and he gave a big speech, and he said regarding Mr. Putin, Russian president this time, this man cannot remain in power. So all United States foreign policy seems to be running around the world, changing regimes, taking the leaders of the countries down, which were democratically elected. In the case of Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine in 2014, he was legally elected president. And Victoria Nuland, with Jeffrey Pyatt, like you mentioned, at the time, ambassador to Ukraine from United States, have handpicked Ukrainian government. And Oliver Stone is a famous filmmaker from the United States. He made a great movie about it, Ukraine on Fire. So if everybody wants to know how the Maidan coup, Maidan from Ukrainian is translated as a square. That's a square in front of, I believe, the parliament in Ukraine. So if you guys hear Maidan, that means the coup at the square in front of the parliament in Ukraine, in the capital city, Kiev. Because not many foreigners know what Maidan is, right? But we do know now that media has been lying to us. Our corrupt politicians have been lying to us. While all this year, our taxpayers' money have been killing people in former Eastern Ukraine area. Now, after the referendum, that area joined Russia, even though we know Ukraine and the West do not recognize the referendums and referenda, but doesn't matter. It's just the area of Donbass region, Lugansk and Donetsk, where people for the last 9 years have been killed. And we American people have been sold lies that we're fighting Putin for all these 9 years. Russian army wasn't even there until 2022. So who was Ukraine fighting? Their own people, their former citizens. At that time, their own citizens, is Ukraine claims it's their territory, right? So if Ukraine claims that's their territory, how come you're killing your own citizens with weapons provided by United States taxpayers? This is insanity. And our government volunteered all of us to have blood on our hands by doing that. I mean,
one thing that I think it's very important for American people, especially, to understand, Europeans as well, you know, as you say, that it's insanity, but it's not. They're not stupid. They're not crazy. They're genuinely evil, and they're doing it on purpose.
Deliberate. They're deliberate. Yes, yes.
I mean, and it's so easy to say, oh, you know, if only, you know, good old Joe Biden knew all the terrible things that the UCROPs were doing, then, you know, he'd put a stop to it. But no, he's the guy who's telling them to do it. You know, I mean, and the thing that Americans need to understand is that the crimes that the U.S. government has committed around the world, most especially for the last 20 years, since the 21st century, the things that they've done to people in other countries, they're now starting to do to the people in the United States, and they're gonna do it.
And we have no more free speech. If you post something that either Facebook or Twitter or YouTube does not like, the account is banned, the account is demonetized, or whatever they do to people, just to suppress the truth. And recently, Elon Musk came out and exposed some of it, just a tip of the iceberg of how the former FBI officials were working for Twitter, and how in 2016 and all through the years, they were pretty much handpicked whom to silence, and how to silence the stories about Biden and his son Hunter, and how to make it all go away by labeling it Russian propaganda. So truth in America now equals Russian propaganda. So if they want to suppress something, they will say, oh, that's Russian propaganda. You can't disseminate it. You can't post it on your Facebook, or you can't. And so now we know that that story was true, but Twitter tried to suppress it on the orders of FBI, calling it a Russian propaganda story.
Exactly.
So nowadays, like I said, the safe bet is Russian propaganda equals truth. That's what it seems nowadays.
It is. And, you know, my Twitter account was deleted. I was banned from Twitter in 2016. 2019, my Facebook account was deleted. I was banned from Facebook. And this is after years of getting, you know, being on Facebook and getting, you know, making a comment and say, okay, you're blocked for 30 days. And then I'd get back on after being blocked for a month. I'd get back on, and a week later I'd get another block, you know. And then finally one day they just erased my account. My YouTube account that I had for 12 years was blocked. It was deleted, and I'm totally blocked. I can't start another one there. I can't even sign in to, like, you know, like a video or make a comment. You know, that happened in 2022. I made a short 40-second video from the front with a column of Russian armored vehicles. And basically I said, hey, these guys are here to liberate the good people, to help the good people. And the bad people, we're going to kick their ass. And that's all it was. It went viral. I mean, it got hundreds of thousands of views in less than 24 hours. Wow. And the next day, my whole YouTube channel was gone, you know. And
that's what they do. Yeah, that's what they do.
That's what they do. And it's important to understand that, you know, I mean, like say Alex Jones, for example, he was, in my opinion, the canary in the coal mine. You know, he was the first guy to get totally like unpersoned, you know, to be completely deplatformed. And he's about the only guy that I know that's been more censored than myself, you know. And the thing is, people need to understand that, you know, the guys who, you know, who continue to have a YouTube account, they're lucky. And eventually, you know, Google's going to get around to erasing them and stuff too. But, you know, or as soon as it starts getting big. But, you know, a lot of them, you know, they walk a fine line. They're not there really to tell the truth. You know, they're there to get views or make a name for themselves or make some money or something like that. And that's, you know, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's, you know, being a professional journalist or whatever, but it's not being an information warrior. And the ones who really are fighting against the Nazis, the ones who are really telling the hard truth and are putting it in context in a way that can make people understand what's really happening. And not only that, what they really need to do. You know, those are the ones that scare, you know, Silicon Valley and the oligarchs in the West. And those are the ones that get deplatformed, you know. And so, I mean, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor that, you know, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube kicked me off, you know. And I'm still on Telegram and I'm still on VContact. I mean, I have 3 websites. I have RussellTexasBentley.com. I have RussellTexasBentley.org and RussellTexasBentley.info, and they're all hacked. I can't even get on any of them. They're still there, but I can't get on any of them, you know. I mean, so, you know, somebody serious is doing some real work to try and prevent me from being able to say what I say. And so people just need to understand. I mean, I'm glad to see all the people from around the world that have come here, all the guys that have started talking about Donbass in the last year, but I didn't come here last year. I didn't start talking about it last year. I've been talking about it for 8 years, and the things that all these people that are coming here now are saying are the things that I said 5 or 6 years ago and been saying all along, so, I mean, and I'm glad they're here and I'm glad the message is getting out, but, all these, these people, then, I mean, especially, some of the guys that, are claiming to be experts or, are thought of as experts now, and they've never been here. They never started talking about this war until, a year ago, and that just, I mean, it's a little bit irritating to see, some dude that, I mean, it's like, how do you say it? He comes in the 9th inning of the baseball game and thinks he won the game, he's going to be the coach or something, but I'm glad and I appreciate everybody that's getting the truth out. We all have a contribution that we can make. We all have our part that we can play. I mean, not everybody, can be a soldier and come to the front and serve in the army like I did. Not everybody can afford to send money for human aid. Not everybody, can, write eloquently or speak persuasively, but everybody can do something.
If you were in America, what would you advise Americans do if they understand what is happening right now between Russia and Ukraine? I have told people, contact your representatives, contact your elected officials, give them a call, send them a letter. But on the other hand, people say, but they don't listen to us.
They don't listen. I mean, Elena, let me tell you, and I've been telling Americans this for some years now. The last time I voted was in the year 2000. After Bush stole the election, I finally understood. In 1990, I ran for United States Senator in the state of Minnesota on an independent party as an independent party candidate. And I mean, I got 30,000 votes, which was like, 1%, but, I trusted in American politics back then. And I can tell you that in 1990 in Minneapolis, which was back then a very educated and progressive city, one of the best in the United States, there was an anarchist newspaper that I saw that was like on the street. And it had a picture that year. It was George Bush Sr. running against Bill Clinton, or Clinton running against George Bush Sr. And they had a picture of Bush Sr. and Clinton. And the headline was, and they used a little bit more explicit language, but they said, same excrement, different pile, if you catch my meaning there. And, and even back then, and I was like 30 years old, I was old enough to know better, but I thought, but I was still like naive and idealistic. I thought, well, I mean, there's got to be something different. I mean, Clinton's got to be a little bit better than George Bush Sr., the director of the CIA, the guy that ran the Iran-Contra and all these, but you know what? There's no difference. There's no difference. Voting in the United States in the 21st century is political masturbation. It is self-delusion.
Are we gonna get censored?
No. I'm not saying any bad words. That's a medical term. But listen to me. It is a fantasy. It is self-delusion. It is a waste of time and resources and energy. And in the end, all it does is leave a mess that somebody's going to have to clean up. So it's really a very apt, exact, specific analogy for it. And I tell you that, I mean, the elections are totally rigged now. No one can run for any office above a small town mayor that isn't already, you know, completely controlled by the establishment. You know, if somebody tries to get in, there's no way that they can win. I mean, and if they did win, they would be either co-opted or assassinated. I remember, I don't know if you remember Paul Wellstone, the U.S. Senator from Minnesota. He was actually one of the guys I ran against in 1990. And he was the last real honorable person that ever stepped foot in the U.S. Senate. And he died in a very mysterious plane crash right before the election when he was getting ready to win another 6 years. You know what I mean? So seriously, you know, writing to your representative, I mean, you see what I have right behind me right here? That's an AK-74.
Is it the real one? A real
Of course
one?
it's real. Of course it's real. The thing that people need to understand, and you know what? And that right there is a Bronick Gillette. That's a bulletproof vest. And it's real too.
Yeah.
And the people of the United States need to understand that they face the same exact enemy that the people of Donbass faced. And the only way that they can protect themselves against it is the same way the people of Donbass protected themselves. You know, I mean, it's not like, you know, if Donbass had just surrendered and the Ukrainian army had come in and took control and they'd had the choice, oh, we're going to vote for Poroshenko or Zelensky. No, we're looking at genocide. We're looking at ethnic cleansing. We're looking at, you know, the intentional destruction of the quality of life and, you know, the future of our civilians and our families. And so people have to get serious. This is every bit as serious. This is the Third World War. And it's not going to be won by writing letters to the editor or writing letters to your representative or voting for the Green Party or the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. It's not going to be won by standing on the corner with the sign and then going home and, you know, hitting the angry sign on the Facebook comment. People are going to have to make they're going to have to suffer and they're going to have to sacrifice. They're going to have to endure just like the people of Donbass have. And I mean that. And I'm talking to, you know, and actually I have to say that in America, I'd say 97. Well, here's another thing I say about America, and I'll try and put this nicely too so we don't get censored. If you eat poop for long enough, you get used to it. But if you eat it for too long, you start to like it. And then when someone comes along and says, hey, don't eat that, it's bad for you, it's disgusting, are you out of your mind? And then the people are like, no, we like it, it's good, we've been eating it for so long. Oh yeah. 97%, in my opinion, of the people in the United States these days have been eating it for too long and they like it. That's bad news. But the good news is 3% of the population of America is 10 million people. And 10 million people that understand what's really going on. And if they get together and do what has to be done, they can make a difference. And that's what it's going to take.
Well, everybody is predicting that the United States at some point will descend into the civil war. Holding fingers crossed, but the way it's going, there is definitely people are left voiceless. People are constantly censored. There is no more free speech. The elections are selections. I know I also ran for office in 2020. I ran for United States Congress. I have seen what happened on the elections night, I could see the numbers and how they went up and then they went down, and there's a mystery what happens to these numbers. It's insanity. And
it's not
I
it's
don't
not
know.
a mystery, and it's not insanity. We know what happened. They rigged it, and they didn't do it because they were crazy. They did it because they were doing it on purpose.
And it's one of these things that nobody wants to acknowledge that. And God forbid somebody says anything about it. Oh, but we have perfect elections. So in other words, the denial, the lies is our everyday lifestyle in America. No matter it's a TV, no matter it's if a politician speaks, or is it a journalist, quote unquote journalist, or if you talk to somebody on the street, Americans are really not interested at large. Maybe a small percentages, but the war in Ukraine, we're shelling billions of taxpayer dollars. Most people cannot afford groceries anymore. We keep printing money. Inflation is insane, but nobody really, voices a concern. Ukraine, it's someplace over there. No, you being, first of all, paying for salaries, government officials of Ukraine, the social packages, Zelensky's salary, all the parliament members, we are paying the salaries. We American taxpayers. But American taxpayers seem to not care. I mean, another 100 billion. Oh, let's do another 100 billion. And now our Congress, our Senate in May of 2022, when they voted one of the first bills, there was 40 billion to Ukraine aid. And the same day, they tabled and blocked the bill of 48 billion that would provide help to American small businesses, the gyms, the restaurants who suffered during COVID closures. The same Senate didn't have enough votes to help American small businesses and American citizens. And they voted that same day for 40 billion to Ukraine. I'm thinking, people, you don't understand who these people work for. They're not working for us. And they're lying to us that they're trying to save Ukraine by sending weapons and sending all this money. The only thing it does, it kills more Ukrainians. Wouldn't you agree?
That's exactly right.
What does the help, quote unquote, from America in the EU, in your mind, and the weapons actually do to Ukraine? Are they saving Ukraine and Ukrainian people?
No, they can't. And you know what? There's no question about how this war is going to end up. Russia is going to take control, or rather liberate, as much of Ukraine as it feels it needs to in order to secure its own national borders and to secure the lives of the ethnic Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. You understand that this, Ukraine and this part of South Russia was under German Nazi occupation during the Second World War. This is the part of Russia where the Nazis came. In Donetsk, the city of Donetsk, there's a mine here in the center of the city, just a couple of kilometers where I am right now. And the German Nazis occupied this city for 700 days, less than 200 years. But they threw 75,000 people down that mine shaft in 700 days. And it was 360 meters deep when they came here, and it was 60 meters deep when the Red Army came and drove them out. And it was filled with human bodies. And the German Nazis, when people say, the Nazis hated the Jews and all that, they killed 6 million Jews. Okay. Yeah, they were against the Jews, that's for sure. But they were first against the communists and against the Soviet Union and against the Russian people. They killed 26 million Soviet citizens in that war, and of course, for the first few years of the war, the British and the Americans were just kind of sitting back. Franklin Roosevelt himself said, well, if it looks like the Germans are going to win, then we'll go in on the sides of the Russians. And if it looks like the Russians are going to win, we'll go in on the sides of the Germans. And in fact, they did. After the Second World War, thousands, multiple thousands of Nazi war criminals were relocated to the United States and to Canada. Chrystia Freeland, who's really, she's the deputy prime minister, but she's the boss of Canada now. Her grandfather was a Nazi collaborator in Ukraine.
Yes, he was. Yes. And I read an article that she, instead of showing at least, some type of a discontent about, obviously she cannot rewrite her parents' past, but she could at least have an opinion and distance herself. But she didn't. She, in fact, says that she embraces what her parents and the ideology, and this is insane. Again, I know you don't like the word insane, but I am for lack of words, that we in the 21st century have to discuss Nazis that are alive and well and are being rejuvenated and rebirthed in Europe after what the whole world went to in World War II, and how Americans and Brits and Soviet soldiers at the time, Red Army, fought side by side against Hitler and against Nazi ideology. And now United States, with the taxpayers' dollars, financing the people who openly in Ukraine profess Nazi ideology and spew the same slogans that Ukrainian nationalist Nazi collaborators during World War II were declaring back then. Now Nancy Pelosi repeats this "Glory to Ukraine, Hail Heroes, Hail Ukraine" slogan in United States Congress. We are insane here. If there is a right side of history, if there is a wrong side of history, I think it's pretty easy to see who is on the wrong side of history at this point in time. And who is supporting the ideology that has been condemned by generations of people and their ancestors of those people who died during World War II. You mentioned 26 million only on behalf of Soviet Union. And to be honest, I think there is also what they call unofficial figure. There's like official figure and unofficial. I almost seen the number of unofficial figures going towards and upwards of 40 plus million people. So we're saying that 40, 20, 30 million people, millions of people died during World War II fighting against Nazi ideology that proclaims that there is one group of people superiority over other groups of people. And now in Ukraine, with the United States, the beacon quote unquote democracy and rights and freedoms and human rights and equality, that we are actually installed the Nazi regime in Ukraine, who allows the Nazi ideology professing militants in their army, the Azov battalion and all these other battalions, the official part of Ukrainian military forces. And it's, how do you explain that we Americans, I just don't understand. How could we even be there in this narrative on this wrong side of this history? It's insane to me.
Well, and first of all, people need to understand that for the last decade or so, every year, Russia has introduced a resolution in the United Nations to condemn the glorification of Nazism and fascism. And for the last 8 years, the only ones that voted against it were the United States and Ukraine, out of the whole United Nations. Some nations abstained from voting, but majority of nations were like, of course we condemn, Hitlerism and Nazism. And the United States and Ukraine voted against it. And they said, oh, it's for because we support free speech.
Free speech, exactly. I was going to say, really, you support free speech here in America. Let me tell you a few things about free speech in America.
Of course. I mean, if you see a man walking down the street in a dress and you say, look at that man wearing a dress, you can get arrested or you can get sued for it. You know, because I identify as a woman, so you have to call me a woman. You know, I mean, so what free speech is there, you know? I mean,
yeah.
But so, and the other thing I want to say too is that, you know, Americans who have so little grasp of history, but if you really look at it, what the German Nazis did, what Hitler wrote about in Mein Kampf in the 1930s, and what they tried to do in the 1940s against Russia was really exactly the same thing that the Europeans did to the Native Americans, to take all their land and basically just kill them all, you know, or put them on, you know, so, you know, ethnic cleansing and genocide on an industrial scale. So, you know, Americans need to understand that a lot of the ideas that the German Nazis had, you know, which Nazism, fascism, well, first of all, fascism was described by Benito Mussolini, the founder of the Italian Fascist Party. He said it should better be called corporatism because it is the merger.
It is the merger of the state and the corporations, exactly. Yep.
And that is exactly what the United States has today. The corporations own the U.S. government.
Yep. And we see what happened with Nord Stream 2 and how now all the businesses and the corporations are moving into Europe. That market is now up for grabs for all the American corporations. And of course, I read an article about the land in Ukraine. I even think President of Russia, Mr. Putin, had given an interview and he said, everybody's worried about Ukrainian grain that cannot leave Ukraine and cannot be distributed. You guys don't understand that that's not Ukrainian grain anymore. It's owned by all Western corporations. And I did a search and of course, Zelensky signed a law which was to allow the sales of the land. Ukrainian land was under moratorium and the sale of land was prohibited for a long number of years. But Zelensky, first order of business, quickly signed the law allowing that. And of course, Ukrainian people have protested that because they were afraid that the land will be sold to foreigners and foreign corporations. But they found the ways around it. There is plenty of loopholes and finds out there is a lot of foreign companies now under whether declassifying the land from agricultural to some other use or making 50-year leases. They moved in and Mr. Putin was right. There is very little in Ukraine that is belonging to Ukrainian people. The foreign corporations and the gas companies and the oil companies, if we remember Hunter Biden and his dealings with Burisma Oil, just following the coup. So the coup happened in Ukraine in 2014, sponsored again by Biden, Obama, Hillary, Newland, and all these guys, McCain, Kerry. And then Biden's son gets a job as a chief legal counsel for Ukrainian oil company, Burisma Oil, gas and oil company. Like what? So people of Ukraine had to live through removing of their legally elected president just so Hunter Biden's son could get a job in Ukraine, right? It's insane what's happening.
They're doing it on purpose. They did it all on purpose. They made, and people say, oh, Hunter Biden was getting $50,000 a month as salary and he didn't even do any work for Burisma. They were stealing billions, thousands and thousands of millions of dollars. And as Hunter Biden said on his, on his emails that was found on his computer, and 10% for the big guy.
Big guy, yes. And remember, there was this guy who came forward, Babulinski. I think Tony Babulinski. I'm not sure what's his first name. He was a former associate with Hunter Biden, and he kind of like turned whistleblower. And there is the excellent movie that was put together by Ukrainian investigative journalists about Hunter Biden and their dealings. And that involved the gas, the tariffs, in other words, they were doing deals through Cyprus, through Latvia, through Poland. Everybody is involved. And this is done by Ukrainian investigative journalists, not even anybody else.
Yeah, sure, of course. Well, I mean, and it's good that there are still Ukrainian honest journalists, because, I mean, their country is being raped and robbed by the West. I mean, it's being destroyed, and everything that's not nailed down is being stolen. You know,
and that's what they said. They said that we don't want to be in the end. They actually said they have to cover their faces while they made that movie. The movie is called Ukrainian Lives Matter. It's presented by a former parliament member, Nadia Savchenko. I think she is presenting in that movie. And they said in the end of the movie that we do not want to be the monkeys in Biden's cage. And the whole movie, the premise is, they said, it's about external governing of Ukraine. Ukraine is basically turned into a colony ran by foreign interests, foreign politicians, and foreign corporations. And Ukrainian people not only do not own anything per se, they cannot speak freely. Zelensky banned all opposition parties. They're left voiceless. Now he has a war in church. The priests are getting harassed. And we're being sold an idea that we in some way helping, and Ukraine is this democracy. Have you seen, Russell, how they tie people to the street posts and the lampposts and beat these people and take their underwear down for public humiliation? That's like medieval style lynches. Ukraine has become a complete degradation. I don't know. I used to live in Ukraine. I remember what it used to be. This is total degradation, and American money is paying for that, for destruction of the country and destruction of the people, and for growing this Nazi ideology that has been slaughtering and killing people in Donbass for the last 9 years and counting. It's and people in America, in the world, have to know that, and you as a witness to that, a first-hand witness.
I am a first-hand witness, and my warning to the good American people is this, is that if they want to know what their rulers in America have in mind and in store for them, all they have to do is look at Ukraine.
Amen. That's what I was just going to say, Russell. For years, I've been, remember when Trump impeachment happened, the first impeachment? I could not believe it. I wrote all over wherever I could write. I said, people, they did exactly the same thing to president of Ukraine. The only difference was that that president of Ukraine actually fled, and Trump didn't flee, and he actually stood up and fought. But the thing is, they removed the elected president of Ukraine back then in 2014, and we almost lost our own president here in the United States over Ukraine. The same people who created the coup in Ukraine, the same people were trying to impeach Trump. And they were trying to impeach Trump because Trump asked the question, what are we doing in Ukraine? What our money is doing in Ukraine? What are we sending the money to Ukraine? In other words, you cannot even ask the question by being United States president, because you're going to be impeached. You're going to be thrown away. In America,
your Twitter account will be deleted.
Exactly. Well, Trump was banned from Twitter too. Sitting United States president has been banned from Twitter. And again, that's not about whether Trump is good or Trump is bad. That's just a fact that the same people who removed the elected president of Ukraine in 2014 were in charge of America at the time too, and were in charge of the America trying to impeach President Trump. and basically creating the same situation in the Ukraine. And I said to everybody, just like you said, you want to know why is this happening and what's the scenario? Just look to what happened in Ukraine. But people are too blinded. They don't see the parallels between Ukraine and America. But I am agree 100% with you, Russell. If you want to know, Ukraine is like a preview of upcoming attractions. And if Americans think that they're going to be sitting grilling hot dogs and having their beer on the porch for the next 10 years, think again. Ukraine has shown you what can happen and what likely is to happen the more voiceless we become, because Ukrainian people were rendered voiceless. And the corrupt government sponsored by our favorite Biden, quote unquote favorite, totally destroyed that country. And I always said, but the same people who destroyed Ukraine are in charge of United States.
That's right.
Guess what are they going to do to America? They destroyed Ukraine. You think they're interested in saving the United States? These are the same people. So
I mean, and that's what I mean. Americans need to understand that, you know, it's not about black and white or conservative or liberal. There's two sides to this war, and it's the 1% and, you know, the 9% that work for the 1%, and it's the other 90% of us. You know, I mean, if you're, you know, middle class, if you're working class, then you have more in common with, you know, some black dude or some Mexican immigrant than you do with, you know, the dude that some white dude that's, you know, working on top of, you know, the Sears Tower or something in Chicago, you know, some oligarch. The people who love money, you know, and here's another thing, you know, one thing I always say, there's no such thing as a good billionaire, including Trump. No one can earn $1 billion, $1,000 million. That can only be stolen or swindled, you know, and that's 1 billion. You know, I'm talking about, you know, some of these guys, Elon Musk or Bezos or Bill Gates, you know, they have tens or 20s of, you know, $100 billion. That much money cannot be earned. It can only be stolen or swindled. And it's not even money at that point. It's political power, you know, and so no one can earn it. No one deserves it. Every billionaire on this planet is an enemy of humanity. It's a war of victory or death. It's either going to be us or them. So people need to, you know, take this as seriously as a real war, because that's what it is. And I mean, me, I'm a Russian Orthodox Christian. I believe in God. I believe in the devil. I believe they're both here in this world right now and working. And all of us are on one side or the other. And it's not what you say, what side you're on. It's what you do that proves which side you're on. And we all have to be ready for some hard times. We have to be ready to make sacrifices for the greater good, for the future of humanity. That's our only hope, you know. And, you know, those who are on the side of good, who lose their lives, are martyrs. I believe in God. I believe in another life, another world after this. So, you know, I'm not afraid to give my life for a good cause. And that's what people need to understand is going to be asked of many of them. And they can either do it or not. You know, I mean, it's, you know, we're all going to die, and we have the choice, not whether we're going to die, but how we're going to live. So on your feet or on your knees.
Do you, Russell, believe that we're on the brink of nuclear war? We, meaning the United States or some insane politician. Remember what they did with those 2 rockets that hit Poland, and how quickly the Baltic states said, oh yeah, we need to quickly call for Article 5. we need to attack Russia. Russians rockets, they did it. Zelensky, yeah, Russian rockets hit Poland, and then finds out they were not Russian rockets.
They were Ukrainian S-300s.
Yes, but they were ready to attack Russia, nuke Russia, or whatever else they were going to try to do, invade Russia. What do you think?
Well, I think that this war is going to go on for a long time. It's not just about Ukraine. It's a political and economic war that can go on for years or maybe even decades more. I do think it's going to end in a nuclear exchange. The people that own the U.S. government and military are, I mean, they're completely evil. They're criminally insane. And I think that they think, you know, they've got enough money. They've already got their bunkers and their cities built.
Yeah, they probably have their bunkers ready, because the level of recklessness with which the policy and Russia nuclear nation is handled, they don't understand that that's not Iraq, where they pretended Iraq had nuclear weapons and basically destroyed that nation. Russia actually does have nuclear weapons, and Russia will not go down without a good fight. And
they will not go down at all. I mean, if Russia goes down, the world's going down with them. I mean, and Putin's already said it, and I don't blame him, and I have no problem with him saying that. You know, I mean, Russia has already, you know, in the last 100 years, Russia has suffered the greatest attack, you know, in human history, and they ain't going to do it again. They have the weapons. You know, if they can't stop their enemies from destroying them, they're going to destroy those enemies too. Hopefully, I mean, and you know what? There's one hope. There is one hope, and that is that the good people, Russia is standing up to this satanic 1% cabal right now. Russia is the obstacle to them being able to take over the world. And if the good people of the world, of the United States, of Europe, of the rest of humanity, of Australia and New Zealand and South America get together, and I mean together, like a fist, and stand against it, I hope and believe that we can save the world, but that's what it's going to take. Everybody's going to have to do their part. You know, people in America, you know, they can't just say, oh, well, Russia's going to save us or something like that. We all need to get together. We all have to do our part, you know, make our sacrifice if necessary. But that's the only hope that we have.
But you're right. I do believe that the way it's looking is probably very likely that there will be a nuclear exchange at some point. And people don't understand that. They think that they're going to, Biden changed our nuclear policy. And I think they said he fitted more towards Obama, that United States can do what they call preemptive strikes, or a strike first. They actually have a bunch of reasons. And one of the reasons is like, doesn't even have anything to do with actual strike or threat. It could be, the deemed threat could be hacking attack. In other words, if somebody hacks computers, this could be already a reason to nuke a country. Imagine if, God forbid, somebody hacks some United States government or whatnot computers, and they will blame it on Russia and say, oh yeah, the Russian hackers did it. Now we have a right to nuke Russia. Can you believe that? This is what may happen at any time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why Russia has said, if you hit us, we're going to hit back. We'll be martyrs and you'll just be dead. I mean, and so it's really sad. And it's, you know, that's why it's, you know, it's up to the goodness, the spirit, the souls of all good people in this world now to stand up and do their part. That's the only hope. That is the only hope.
Yeah, because it does seem like our politicians definitely lost their mind. At
They
least
sold their souls. They
they
sold their
sold their
souls.
souls. Absolutely. They don't care about people. They just sold their souls to their donors or whoever their corporate interests are. And yeah, Victoria Nuland, when she delivered that famous speech in 2013 in Kiev, in Ukraine, saying Ukraine needs to have democratic changes. And we Americans have invested $5 billion back then to bring democratic changes to Ukraine. The sponsor of this talk to Kiev business people was Chevron Oil.
Of course, because they want to do the fracking in Ukraine, which is profitable to them, but it poisons the groundwater. You can't drink it. You can't use it to make crops with. I mean, it's genuinely evil, And
well, they're serving the corporations. But I mean, at least if you do, stop pretending. Don't tell me that you care about the little Ukrainian children. Just tell me that you sold your soul to the corporation and you're promoting their interest. But when Biden comes in on TV screen and tells me that, oh, I just looked at the Ukrainian children's eyes, he said it in May when he spoke in Poland, and those eyes, you just have just seen them. That's just, boy. I'm thinking, really? You have not noticed Ukrainian / Donbass children's eyes for the last 9 years, and all of a sudden you see the children's eyes, right? What what hypocrites! It's I don't want to say despicable. It's despicable to watch these people, how they get in front of the camera and suddenly they care about children. The children on Donbass were dying, and children and adults and alike, women and elderly civilians were killed in Donbass. I spoke about it. I wrote about it. Only a few people who know me personally and who know that I am originally from Ukraine area. Of course, I lived in Russia as well. I'm fluent in both languages, but the people who know me believed what I'm saying because I usually will have an article or a photograph or something. But for most people in United States said, Alina, how come I don't see this on TV? And if I don't see it on TV, it must not exist, right? That's a logic nowadays. So, and media, of course, has been complicit. But my question to you, Russell, is what about Russian media? Have you seen Russian media over the years in Donbass, or are they coming only right now, or have they been reporting? Because I have not seen a lot of information in Russian media over the years about Donbass. I watched a little bit of their, political shows, news shows, just to see what's going on. Did you notice an increase of Russian media interest in Donbass, or did you guys have a stable interest in what's happening?
No, of course. Since the special operation started, it's, Russian media coverage has increased tenfold. In the years before, there was some kind of, token coverage. There's really, there's some great channels, like I'm working with an information group called Vozmezdi. They're from Russia. They're doing a lot of human aid, a lot of information journalism like that. Zargrad TV also is a good, has been doing a lot of good stuff here over the years. 60 Minutes, Sovolov, I think the guy and his wife, they've done some good stuff too. A lot of Russian media has been less than impressive, and I'd say that about RT too.
In what sense, Russell?
Well, just that their lack of coverage, and not only that, but they're kind of waffling the words that they choose. The way of their coverage is like, oh, well, we have to show both sides, and maybe, you know, they say since Russia invaded in February 22, you know, I mean, it wasn't an invasion, it was a liberation, you know, I mean, and it's like, there's not, you know, and it's, I mean, it's not like they're not as bad as the West that just outright lies and tells the opposite of the truth, but they put it in such a way like, you know, we don't want to offend our Western partners, you know, or something like that, you know, and it's like, hey, this is a war every bit as much for, I mean, this is a bigger war than the Great Patriotic War. This isn't for the future of Russia, it's for the future of humanity. And Russia is the spear point. Russia is the guiding light for all good people in the world. And, you know, I mean, there's so many things that, you know, I mean, like, to be honest, you know, I've been to Moscow a few times. I've been to St. Petersburg. I don't really like those cities. And I don't really like a lot of the people in those cities because they're liberals. You know, they're rich. They all drive $300,000 Beamers and Mercedes. And, you know, I have no respect for people like that. When there's people fighting and dying here, and, you know, who defends Donbass defends Russia. So the people here have been defending Russia for 8 years. And Russia owes a great debt of gratitude and respect to the people of Donbass that they have yet to pay, and that they need to start considering how they're going to do that pretty soon, you know? I mean, yes, Russia has supported us, but Russia has supported the people of Donbass, you know, up until, you know, this last year. They supported the people of Donbass the same way that the U.S. and NATO supported Ukraine. Oh, we'll give you some money, we'll give you some bullets, we'll let you do the fighting. You know, and so, I mean, you know, I'm a citizen of Russia, you know, and I'm proud of it, you know. I'll tell you something, though. You talk about freedom of speech. There's a law in Russia now that you can go to jail for saying something that discredits the Russian army. You know, yep. I mean, so, you know,
no criticism
I'm proud
allowed,
to be a Russian.
Right?
You know, I'm a very patriotic Russian. I've defended Russia with my blood and with my life, with a gun in my hand in battle. You know, so anybody that wants to question my patriotism, you know, they better have spent more time in battle on the front than I have, or else they just need to go ahead and shut up about it, you know. But at the same time, it's not patriotic to pretend that serious mistakes haven't been made. If you don't address the mistakes, you can't fix the mistakes.
Absolutely. Why do you think, Russell, that Russia was able to successfully join Crimea and nothing happened to Donbass? I watch a lot of different interviews, and of course, like I said, in Ukrainian and in Russian, just to get the perspective from everyone, to see who's got grievances for what. And sometimes I hear people who, in their mind, would like to have seen, and they are Ukrainian people who obviously do not agree with the Nazi regime that is ruling Ukraine and that came to power in 2014. And their grievance is that why is that Russia didn't help and didn't basically, you know, conjoin or join Donbass as they did Crimea in 2014. Do you have a way of explaining how come that, you know, I know that Crimea had a referendum to join Russia, and I believe Donbass just had a referendum to be independent or autonomous but within Ukraine, correct?
Yeah, so, that's correct. And
so
I mean,
Donbass was not seeking to join Russia, and Crimea was. Is that why Donbass did not join Russia when Crimea did in 2014?
Well, I mean, for me, and, you know, I can only say this is my impression, my perspective, but
sure.
Crimea, the Sevastopol Navy base, is a strategic, existential military asset for Russia. They simply could not afford to lose it. They did not think that Donbass, so they were going to take Crimea whether the people wanted them to or not. Of course, the people really did want them to by the vast majority, but they weren't going to let anyone, take away their naval base there, period. And they also had 40,000 soldiers already, Russian soldiers in Crimea at the time. It wasn't, they didn't invade by the treaty that they made with Ukraine, where they paid them $100 million a year to lease the naval base.
They did.
They had the right to put
have
those soldiers there,
Yeah.
So they had, a very significant fighting force already there in Crimea. They had an absolutely existential reason, that they couldn't afford to lose this strategic asset. So they made the right move in Crimea. Absolutely. I totally support it. I think that they made a mistake in not understanding that Donbass was every bit as strategic and essential to Russia as the Crimea was. And I think it was a big mistake that they didn't do what they did in 2022 in 2014. And there may be some good reasons for that, economic, militarily, politically. But, they got strung along by the Minsk agreements for 8 years. And and now Merkel and Hollande have both come out and said, yeah, it was all BS the whole time. We were just, telling them what they wanted to hear so we could, gain more time to strengthen up the Ukrainian army.
Yeah.
So
the Minsk
mistakes were made.
Yeah, the Minsk agreements basically were a ploy to buy Ukraine more time. And former German Chancellor Angela Merkel and former President of France, the Hollande, Francois, I think Hollande, or I don't remember what his first name was. He came out and confirmed that they signed those ceasefire agreements, and I believe Donbass was supposed to have been given autonomy within Ukraine under Minsk agreement, and the people would have rights to vote for their own local governments and their own local law, but none of that was implemented. And the attacks continued, and Donbass people were continuing to be killed despite the existence of Minsk peace accords, peace agreement. And now they're all coming out and totally shamelessly saying that they basically created this to buy Ukraine more time, to turn Ukraine into NATO trained army to attack Donbass. But I think you also mentioned in one of the interviews that the reason Russia came in when Russia came in was because of the impending attack from Ukrainian forces in March or something along those lines. I think you mentioned that.
That's exactly right. And it's been fully documented and confirmed. It's beyond any question. The Ukrainian army had 150,000 soldiers, all heavy equipment, extra gasoline, extra ammo. And they had a plan in the first week of March 2022. They were going to assault into the center of the major cities of Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, which would be Donetsk, particularly Makiivka, Izhnovata, Gorlovka, and the city of Lugansk. The reason, what happened in 2015, they tried to make an attack. This is where we got the first Minsk agreement from. They tried to go around the cities and close off the border, but they were smashed out in the open fields by artillery, grads. So they were able to be hit in the open fields. So their plan this time was to come, and you understand that even to this day, even today, the city limits of Donetsk is basically the front line. From our house in Petrovsky district, even though they've moved the Ukrops back some kilometers, but we're still, a 10-minute tank drive from Ukrainian positions to Donetsk city.
Basically a front line. The border is basically
And so
a front line.
their plan
City
was to
limits
come
front line. Wow.
directly, break through the front lines, come directly into the city, and then, just like they did in Mariupol, use the civilians as human shields, which would have neutralized Russia's three main military advantages, which is its air power, its missile power, and its artillery. And then it would have been, it would have been like, Rwanda or Sarajevo or something. It would have been, true hell on earth for the people here. And it would have been, like Stalingrad for the Russians to try and come in and liberate it. So the Russians did make, one of the great military moves and one of the great humanitarian and, moral moves of the 21st century by coming in when they did. They could have come in. They made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, and hopefully those mistakes are now getting ironed out and corrected. We will soon see. My opinion is that, the longer this war goes on, the worse it's going to be, the more difficult it's going to be for Russia, the more it's going to cost Russia and the good people of Ukraine. In my opinion, the minimum as the Russians themselves have said, the goals of the operation are to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. Anything less than Russian control of Kiev and everything east of the Dnieper River and including Odessa and all the way up to Transnistria, anything less than that is a failure and will only invite further attacks and encroachments. The quicker that Russia can make a decisive military victory, take all the land that it needs to, and hold it without retreating a single inch, the better it's going to be for the people of Donbass and Ukraine and Russia and the world.
Why do you think the Russia it doesn't seem like it may have come in with a larger number of troops when it did in February of 2022? It only brought, I read, up to 200,000 troops. And a lot of military experts were saying that this was not enough to basically overtake the positions of Ukrainian troops.
That is correct.
The Western media tries to say that, Putin was going to take Kiev in 3 days, and look, he failed. Well, first of all, Putin never said that he was going to take Kiev or Ukraine, and on top of it, in 3 days. And nobody who comes in with 200,000 troops is going to take a country of 40 million people. That's right. Even insanity to suggest that. But it kind of sort of looked like Russia didn't really want to have this blow and mushroom into the war if they only came with 200,000 troops. What do you think? Why did they bring the 200,000? Because it doesn't seem enough for the big full-scale war. Is it because it seemed like Russia was hoping that if they come in, there will be a good negotiation and this will be over, that nobody really has to, quote unquote, fight and die? But the West looks like refused to negotiate. The first attempts to negotiating were made in Minsk again, and then in Turkey. But then either Biden or Boris Johnson, I think, got involved and they stalled all negotiations. So now there is actual war. But it sort of kind of looked like Russia really didn't want to have it mushroom into the full-scale war. What do you think? Why did they come in? I think
that's true. I think that with honorable and humanistic intentions, Russia expected that most Ukrainians, particularly in the eastern half of the country, would welcome the Russian army as liberators and say, thank you for saving us from these foreign-controlled Nazis. You know, that many of the Ukrainian soldiers would, you know, surrender or even join with the Russians to try and liberate their country from the Western, you know, occupiers that really control, you know, Kiev. And it just didn't happen. They underestimated the propaganda and brainwashing that's been going on in Ukraine most intensely for the last 8 years, but even before that, you know, for many years before that. Operation Dynamic, other CIA, you know, USDA, you know,
USAID, yeah, USAID.
All that kind of stuff was going on here for many years.
Yeah, the books in the library. I think I've seen the American citizen journalist John Mark Dugan. He posted a video of the books that were founded in one of the Lugansk area libraries, I believe. After then, when the Soviet army, I'm saying Russian army came in there, keep thinking World War II, you know, Soviet army, because it's basically very much of a repeat of history here. But in those books in the library, every book, NATO and Me, the book for children, 3-year-old, NATO and Me, and there is a stamp USAID. Paid with American taxpayers' money, brainwashing Ukrainian children about Stepan Bandera, Nazi collaborator with Hitler and during World War II, and about NATO, how grand it is for Ukrainian children to learn about joining NATO. And that's what they were, you know, like you said, the propaganda, the brainwashing from children up to adults.
Well, I mean, I think, and I certainly hope that Russia now has a very realistic understanding of what is going to be involved in liberating, in achieving the goals that they themselves set, to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, to remove it as a threat from, you know, the Russian homeland. And
what do you, go ahead.
Well, just that I think that they're in the process of doing it now. You know, the people here in Donetsk, you know, we love and trust and support Vladimir Putin and the good Russian people that have supported us for all these years. We wonder, you know, we understand, there is no question that there are a lot of fifth columnists, of genuine traitors in Moscow, some inside the Kremlin, you know, that are working not just against, you know, the victory for the Ukrainian war, but working against the future of Russia. And those people need to be dealt with. And they, you know, they are a bigger threat to us than Leopard tanks or HIMARS cannons. You know, it's the traitors in Moscow that are the biggest threat to us and to the future of Russia. And we hope that they will be dealt with, you know, because that is, I mean, Russia cannot be defeated by an outside enemy. It can only be defeated by an inside enemy.
Kind of like the United States, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and we support Russia. You know, we have defended Russia for 8 years here and been glad and proud to do it because Russia defends the future of humanity. And we are in this together with them. But we'd like to see them get a little bit more serious and, you know, go ahead and get busy and let's go ahead and take care of business here, because the longer it goes, the harder it's going to be and the more costly it's going to be.
Yeah, the more costly. How do you see, Russell, this end? What do you see? I've seen in some even Russian media, several personalities rather suggested maybe we will have a Korean scenario, meaning they will divide Ukraine and the part of it will be controlled by Russia. to create a buffer, and that part of it will be controlled by Poland and Hungary and somebody else. I was surprised to hear, and these are some of the personalities that have quite a lot of media traction in Russia, throwing those type of ideas. What do you see? What do you see the Ukraine, or what may be left of it, or is there going to be Ukraine in the end of this war? How do you see this? And of course, I know it's not a crystal ball, but at this point in time, and these things can change, of course. But what do you see?
Well, I think that the most likely scenario is something like Korea. I mean, like I said, if Russia controls anything less than Kiev, and basically a line from Kiev down to the northern tip of Moldova, but at least along the eastern side of the Dnieper River. Anything less than that is a failure and defeat for Russia. So they have to take that much. West of that point, there's really nothing there. That's the most hardcore Lvov Nazis, Franco. I mean, these are the real hardcore banderistas. There's nothing there that's really worth the trouble of having them do terrorist attacks and, like that. I mean, so they can have that, maybe it'll make the Polish a little bit more, friendly towards Russia. If Russia says, yeah, okay, go ahead, take Lvov, whatever, whatever part of it you want.
The interesting part is that following Stepan Bandera, that Nazi collaborator with Hitler, Ukrainian quote unquote nationalist, is criminalized in Poland. So if, Poland, and of course Bandera and Banderites, the members of his Galicia division during World War II, slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Polish people, as well as other people and Russian people and Jewish people, even Ukrainian people who didn't agree with their Nazi ideology. So that would be interesting to see how Poland would work with the Western Ukraine if that ever happened, where Poland criminalizes the very heroes that they hail as their national hero, and which Ukraine now hails as a national hero. And Polish Sejm, their parliament in 2018, I believe, voted to criminalize the people cannot follow Stepan Bandera's ideology in Poland. And a few days later, Ukrainian parliament condemned Polish parliament condemning Bandera. Can you believe that? It's insane. So
of course, I know that that's true, and and it's ridiculous, but at the same time, from the Russian point of view, all right, if all the crazy Bandera Nazis want to fight all the crazy Polish NATO Nazis, let them go at it, as long as it doesn't affect Russia, our great ally Belarus, or anything east of the Dnieper. Let them go at it. Let them deal with their own failed state that they helped to destroy,
Russell, if you were in charge of Russian military, what would you do if Mr. Putin would call you on the phone? It's like, hey, Russell, I think I need a guy like you. Everybody here was just too complicit and too afraid to make rough and tough decisions. If you had your hands free to bring it, basically to make a home run out of this and finish this war, like you said, sooner than later, what do you think some key points that either need to be addressed or you would like to see happen? What do you think needs to be done to wrap this up, of course, as much as possible? And maybe if you were in charge of Russian military operation, what would you do?
Well, if Putin called me up and said he wants to put me in charge of military operations of the Russian army, I would say no, thank you. I would say talked to Alexander Khodorkovsky, the founder and commander of Vostok Battalion, the greatest commander that's ever stepped foot in Donbass. I'd say talk to Prigozhin and Surovikin. Put them in charge. They've done great work. Alexander Khodorkovsky is a genius commander. He is, he is a bogatyr. He is
like the power man, the Superman in Russian fairy tales. Yes.
Like he is a warrior from God. Yeah. And I really mean that. Prigozhin is maybe not such a nice guy, but he's extremely effective. He's a man that was there with his men in Soledar the other day. So what we need, and Surovikin too, is a man that gets on the ground with his men on the front in the fight. That's the kind of commanders that we need. We need guys that have been shot at and have done shooting to make the decisions.
Why do you think they removed the Surovikin and replaced him with General Gerasimov? Is that because Surovikin would be more effective in this other deputy position, or you think it's some type of a possibly internal struggles between different ideas of how things should be handled in the Russian military?
I don't think that they removed Surovikin. I think that they've put Gerasimov back in charge because he is, he is like the head of the whole Russian military, everything. So he's now responsible for the whole thing. And so, and he, he can say, okay, the Navy needs to do this, the Air Force needs to do that, the Army needs to do that, the Special Forces need to do that. He has the rank and the ability to order all those different fields to do what he says they need to do. Surovikin was the head of the rocket and aerospace before.
Yes, airspace troops, yes.
And he's going back to that now. I think that when the Russians finally make their big move, that the rocket and aerospace, the air power of Russia is going to be what really dominates Ukraine when Russia makes its move. So Surovikin's going to concentrate on that. I don't consider it a demotion from him. He's done great work. Prigozhin too. Soledar is the first, significant victory that the Russian military has had in 6 months at least. And and it was funny too, and it's and this is like another way that Russian information warfare needs to do a lot better job. When Soledar was taken, the Ministry of Defense said, oh, yes, it was a combined arms operation and Russian artillery and our Spetsnaz blocked the escape and stuff. And they didn't say anything at all about Wagner. And it was
Wagner group, they're like a private contractor group that's Prigozhin is the leader of.
That's right. And it was exactly and only Wagner troops that did the assault on Soledar. And it was only their troops that took that whole city. And they weren't even mentioned. And then it was like 2 days later, because Russian, more like independent media started saying, well, who was it exactly? You said, and then the MOD had to come out and specifically say, yes, it was only Wagner that did the military assault on Soledar and took it, And that's kind of a little bit disgraceful that they didn't give them the credit, from the get-go, that they kind of had to be squeezed a little bit before they gave credit where credit was due and told the actual truth, So Prigozhin, and it's also, you have to ask yourself, why one of the best military units in the whole Russian military is private contractors. You know, what does Prigozhin know and do that Gerasimov and Shoigu didn't know and didn't do for the last 8 or 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I've read some articles, and some people say that just like every place, I'm sure, just like probably in United States, the bureaucracy, the people like to write good reports, that we have everything on file, we have stockpiles, our warehouse is full of equipment, and then when it comes to they need to equip somebody, is like, oh, sorry, we don't have enough, or we don't have. So I read some articles that people say that it's possible that just like in, I guess in any military, I've heard Scott Ritter, the American Marine, who talks a lot about the Ukraine-Russia war, saying that in American Army, very much the same, the lower commander is afraid to upset the higher commander. So he will report that everything is perfect. They did everything, and on paper they have enough, you know, weapons, enough uniforms, and nobody really wants to deliver the hard truth that sometimes you need to deliver that harsh truth, but the commander on top doesn't want to hear that. And
well,
that creates
you know, and to not speak truth to your superiors when the soldiers that you command will suffer and die because of these shortages, you know, that's only cowardice. Only cowardice.
It is.
And so,
yeah.
What is the first job of a soldier? To be brave, to be courageous. So, you know, I mean, and it is the job of the commander in chief, which is not Shoigu, it's Vladimir Vladimirovich, to weed out these cowards that, you know, that are just yes men and say, oh, everything's fine when it's not. Say, all right, dude, you screwed up. Go to the front with a shovel.
You know who I've heard the other day? I was watching some different videos on the subject, and I came across the interview with somebody by the name of Girkin Ostrelkov.
Yes, I know who that dude is.
But in the latest, what's happening on the front, and thanks to YouTube suggested videos, that's how I get to see some of these new videos that come up. He said something in his interview together with some other gentleman dressed in a uniform. I don't remember that gentleman's name. They said in their mind that Putin, President Putin, needs to become a commander-in-chief, and take leadership and actually become a commander to command Russian troops. I thought that was an interesting thought. What do you think about that?
Well,
you said that Putin is commander-in-chief, but he sort of is, but he sort of isn't, right? Because they have the military commander, and the Russian president is sort of like just basically on paper, commander-in-chief on paper.
Well, I mean,
but he was suggesting.
I mean, it was Putin's decision. It was not Shoigu's decision for Russia to come into Ukraine. It was Putin's decision, and he is the commander-in-chief. And as far as Girkin, he's a guy with a very questionable history here in Donetsk or Donbass. He came here. He was here in 2014. He retreated from Slavyansk. He gave up about half of the territory that the Donbass People's Militia then controlled. He's not very well liked here. He actually, after he retreated, he was chased out of Donbass and told, never to come back if he wanted to continue living. He came back for a little while. During the operation, he hung out with Russian troops. They kicked him out back to Russia too. He's not a very reliable or trustworthy or credible source. I mean, I agree that Putin needs to take more hands-on control too. I mean, and he and Gherkin, who's Pozivnoy is Strelkov.
Oh, that's why he has two last names, because one of his code names. I couldn't figure that out. I see.
Yeah, his real name is Igor Gherkin, you know, like the little pickle.
Well, for some reason, YouTube thought it was important that I view this video. Every other suggested video had his name in it. I was like, oh, I better watch this, and I will ask Russell about this guy.
Well, you know, if YouTube suggests it and supports something, you know, then you can probably figure it's something that's not in the interest of
something is interesting. Why he wants me to see that? Yeah, that's true. Russell, tell us real quick about your humanitarian activity. I think I watched some of your interviews before where you mentioned that your sister has a foundation, I believe. It's my godmother. Oh, your godmother. Pardon me. Could you tell us a little bit about the humanitarian work that you do, and maybe something, if anybody wants to take part of it, what can they do to help the humanitarian effort? If somebody has it on their heart, maybe they would like to know more how you do it, and how could it be done if anybody wanted to.
Well, I started out in 2015 working with the Han Spetsnaz Battalion, doing humanitarian aid. Our first mission was to help Anna Tuv, whose husband and daughter were killed in a Ukrainian artillery attack. Her house was destroyed. She lost her left arm. She had a 2-week-old baby and a 3-year-old son she had to take care of. That was our first mission. We helped her to get money to get her life back together, get a new prosthetic arm like that. I worked with Sud Vremeny, which is a Russian communist organization. I was in their military unit for a while. And we brought a lot of human aid into Donbass from people in Russia. Then in 2015, I co-founded Donbass Humanitarian Aid with my godmother, who grew up in Donetsk, moved to the United States in the early 2000s, and still lives there. She's Orthodox Christian. You can look up, if you just Google Donbass Humanitarian Aid, it'll come right up. It's a registered 501c3 charity in the United States. We do only humanitarian work with civilians and kids mostly, orphanages, kindergarten, stuff like that. People with big families whose houses have been hit by shelling, those kind of things. So if people in the West want to support, you know, humanitarian aid to civilians, Donbass Humanitarian Aid is the way to go. I can send you a link to them. You can put it like in the description of the video or whatever. I also work with a group now called Возмездие, which is Возмездие. It's a Russian humanitarian and also Orthodox Christian organization. We help not only the civilians here, but also some of the heroes that defend the civilians. And so, you know, they're humans too. The DPR, the Donbass troops have done the very heavy part of the work of defending Donbass for the last 8 years, and plus some of the really hard work in this last year here. And they've done so much with so little. I mean, the Russian troops come in and sometimes they need stuff too, but they have a lot more than what a lot of the Donbass guys are working with. And so, you know, even stuff like, you know, gloves or flashlights or sleeping bags, stuff like that, you know, coffee or, you know, cigarettes, things like that. You know, our guys need that too. And Возмездие and and me and some of my friends, we're working to help them out too. You know, I mean, so
you do a
everybody.
lot of, yeah.
I'm on Telegram, and I'm on VContact. They're about the only places I have left now. But and I'll send you the links to those too.
Sure, and VContact is a Russian, right? Is it a VContact is like a Russian platform?
Yeah, VContact is basically Russian Facebook, and it's really cool. It has more than 600 million members.
Wow.
They're from all over the world, not just Russia. Wow. There's a lot of English speakers on it too. People from China, from India, from South America. The quality of information, the quality of people, the quality of the discourse is orders of magnitude higher than what you find on Facebook. I mean,
how do you type it? Is it VK or VContact, or how? What is the way?
You can just, if you put a capital VK, capital V, capital K in Google, it'll come right up.
Okay.
It's basically Russian Facebook. Telegram is kind of like the Russian Twitter. Also,
how people find you on Telegram? Tell people how to find you on Telegram.
It's Tejas Donbass on Telegram, and basically the same thing. I mean, if you just Google my name, Russell Bentley or Russell Texas Bentley, you might have to go down through all the hit pieces that they put up at the top of the search, but eventually you'll find me on VContact and on Telegram.
And
one thing though, you have to watch out on Telegram. Ukraine propagandists have made, I mean, for a lot of pro-Russian channels, including mine, there are multiple
clones,
fake accounts too,
fake accounts, like clones, yeah.
Yeah, and so you have to watch out for that. My main channel on Telegram has about 13,000 subscribers.
If somebody goes there, they're in the right place if they have about 13,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and the same thing. I have like 13,000 friends and followers on VContact too. I mean, so if it's only got like 100 or 10 or something like that, that ain't me. And so just I do some writing too from time to time. Just check me out on Google. Telegram and VContact are excellent. Really, they're the best platforms you can find in the West today to get real, uncensored, honest news.
Excellent. Russell, tell us before we go, and in the last couple of few words, what it feels like to be right now in Donetsk, in Donbass, to be in the war zone. How do you guys cope with the deaths every day, seeing people dying, being deprived of the basics like water, having the fear of unknown, how this war is going to end, how long it's going to take, the neighbors, the people I believe you said in some of the interviews, some of your friends have died. You lost some of your friends as well, that you've been so close. How does it feel to a human being to be in the midst of all of that in Donbass? How do you go about your day? How do you find your strength?
It's definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done some hard things in my life before I came here, but it's also the best thing. I'm 62 years old, and I'm the happiest that I've ever been in my whole life. This is what I was born to do. This is my destiny. There's nothing in the world that I would rather do. If somebody offered me $1 million a month to go live in Dubai, I wouldn't be interested. This is what I want to do. This is where I've found my home here in Donetsk. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to live the rest of my life here. I'm going to defend it as long as it needs defending. And, as goes Donbass, so goes the world. So what we're doing here is defending the future of humanity. There's no more important, greater job. This is God's work, and there's nothing else I'd even be slightly interested in doing.
So you found your purpose. Are you going to run for office there? Because you can. right?
That's right. That's right.
Because
I might
they're
even
going
run
to
in
have
Russia.
Parliament and all. I think that they are talking about it. Well, Russell, for what positions? A senator or something? I mean, hey, you could run for something.
Well, I think they'd probably want me to be something like the head dog catcher or something like that.
Well, we'll see, because I read somewhere that if all goes well, there is a certain procedure that the Russian Federation is working on, and they're going to have elections, how I understand it, in
That's right. Of course they are.
regions that just recently, via referendum, joined Russian federations, are going to have elections. I'm not sure if it's 2024 or 23. I think 23 next year, I think. Not
Well,
sure.
I mean, I'm not really that interested in running for office, because I have some friends, some people that I know that I would much rather see in any, position of responsibility more than me. And I'm happy to support them. But
We'll
I like
see. The
doing
time
what
will
I'm doing.
tell, right?
Yeah.
The time will tell. Well, Russell, I have so many questions, but I am just in awe listening to you. I think I am lost for words. I have lists of questions here. Let me ask you one more before we go, because I just can't have enough of your intellect and the stories that you share. What would be, regarding this situation, Russia, Ukraine conflict, United States, if you could sum it up in, few sentences, what do people need to know about this? Myth versus reality. In your own words, like, what do people in the world, if you had only what they call it elevator speech, few sentences, few key points, myth versus reality about this situation, Russia, Ukraine, and I don't know, United States, NATO conflict, and what's happening in Donbass. What are some key takeaways that every person should know?
Well, first of all, this is the real battle of evil against the future of humanity. Our enemies are the enemies of all good people in the world. They are the 21st century version of the German Nazis, in some cases even the same people or descendants of the same people. This is a war for the future of humanity, and it's a war. It's a war for victory or death. Either those who consider themselves the masters are going to win and exterminate most of us and enslave the rest, or we're going to liberate humanity from this parasite class that is the scourge, the real Satanists of this world. And we will liberate ourselves from them by destroying them, which is exactly what we need to do. So it's either they're going to destroy us or we have to destroy them. There's a lot more of us than them. We're on the side of God. So that's our job. That is exactly the situation. And everybody does their part. Everybody does their part of the work. We can win. But it's going to take all of us together. And if we don't win, then we're going to be exterminated. Our children are going to be sex slaves or organ donors. And the most evil people in the history of humanity are going to rule the world forever. So let's get busy.
Let's get busy. I like it. Well, on that note, I want to thank you for being with me. I hope we can do it again. I think the time just flew by. I would have you all day if I could, but I know you'd have to go and rest. And
okay, well, let's keep in touch, Elena. I'm very happy to talk to you. And yes, I'll send you the links to my Telegram and Human Aid and like that.
Yes, I can post them in the description of the videos that we're doing. And I hope we'll schedule some other time and we'll get some updates and some thoughts from you on what is going on. As you said, it looks like it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
It looks like it's going to take. So I just want to wish you to be safe, you and your family. And hopefully, there is a miracle. I don't know who to pray anymore. I mean, maybe miracle of God, and one day some of the politicians will wake up and will settle it out and we'll have peace. But so far it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's going to be a long way to peace. And I want to thank you for being honest and for being truthful and speak what really is happening, what really happened, and for everything that you do for the world. Like you said, this is a matter of humanity, for humanity in the world, not just Donbass, which is obviously the big part of it too.
Well, thank you too, Elena. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Yes,
and thank you
too.
for your good work too.
Thank you very much.